Episode 1. The First Glow in Darkness. I should have never stepped inside that church. That's what I keep telling myself now. But that night, curiosity pulled me across the cracked stone steps, under the arch of a door that had been locked for nearly 50 years. The townspeople whispered about it. La Iglesia del Silencio, they called it, the Church of Silence, abandoned after a fire that, strangely, left no ash, no smoke, and no explanation. And yet, it still stood. The wooden beams, the stained glass, the altar, untouched by time or flame. I remember the sound of my boots echoing across the hollow nave. Dust floated like ghostly veils, stirred by the night wind pushing through the broken windows. And there, at the far end of the sanctuary, stood the altar. At first I thought it was the moon. A silver-blue shimmer spilled across the cracked marble floor, rippling like water. But when I raised my eyes, I saw it, an altar glowing in the dark. No candles lit it, no torch, no source of fire, just light, pulsing as if it breathed. I froze. My body wanted to flee, but my eyes, they were chained to that impossible radiance. The altar wasn't just shining, it was alive. Something strange happened then. The air grew warm, though I saw no flame. The smell was sharp, acrid, like flesh too close to a hearth. I looked for smoke. There was none. Instead, the shadows of the pews stretched long and thin toward me, as if they too were crawling closer to the light. And then the sound began. Not music, not whispers, something in between. A low hum trembling the walls, vibrating in my bones. The kind of sound you don't hear with your ears, but with your soul. I forced myself forward, step by hesitant step, until I stood before it. The altar glowed like molten stone, yet I felt no heat on my skin. My trembling hand rose on its own, as though the light commanded it. But just before my fingers touched the surface, the glow shifted. It looked at me, not with eyes, but with presence, like a gaze piercing straight through my ribs, pinning every secret I'd ever buried. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, only feel that it knew. Then the hum deepened, swelling like 1,000 hidden throats chanting, and in that vibration I heard words, not in English, not in Latin, but in some language older than time, yet somehow I understood. It was a question. Not, "Who are you?" Not, "Why are you here?" But, "Will you kneel?" My knees buckled. I wasn't praying, not really. I was surrendering. And as they touched the cold stone floor, the light flared, violent, blinding, and for a split second I saw shapes dancing inside it. Not angels, not saints. Something burning without flame, screaming without sound, trapped forever in the glow. I should have run, I should have closed my eyes, but I didn't. Because in that altar I thought I saw my own reflection. Episode 2. The Ashes That Were Not There. When dawn broke, I returned to the church, against all reason, against every instinct screaming at me to stay away. Yet I had to know if what I'd seen was real, or just a fever dream stitched from shadows and superstition. The townspeople were already gathered at the gates. Old women with rosaries clutched to their lips, children hiding behind their mothers' skirts, men staring at the heavy wooden doors as if expecting them to breathe. No one dared to step inside, but when they saw me, their eyes sharpened. They knew. They could smell the glow on me, like smoke clinging to a sinner. "Tell us," one of them demanded. "Did it burn again?" I should have lied. I should have shaken my head and walked away, but my mouth betrayed me. "Yes," I whispered. "It burned." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some crossed themselves, others spat at the ground, and before I could escape, they followed me inside. The church looked different in daylight, emptier, weaker. The stained glass windows bled dull colors onto the cracked floor. And yet the altar still pulsed faintly, a ghost of its midnight fire. It glimmered like dying embers refusing to vanish. The villagers rushed forward, expecting to find blackened wood, melted stone, piles of soot. But there was nothing, no ash, no scorch marks, no trace of fire at all, only that strange shimmer of heatless light. "Impossible," an old man muttered. He pressed his hand against the marble, then yanked it back with a cry. His palm was unburned, but his eyes filled with terror. "It hurts," he whispered. "No flame, but it burns." A murmur swelled into panic. Some shouted that it was a miracle, a sign of God's mercy. Others swore it was the devil's trick, a fire that consumes the soul instead of the body. And there, in the confusion, I saw the first fracture: faith against fear, belief against doubt. One woman, a widow dressed in black, stepped closer to the altar. Her voice trembled. "If it is holy, it should bless us. It should heal." Before anyone could stop her, she laid a withered hand on the glowing stone. For a moment, nothing happened. Her lips curved into a smile of relief. But then her face contorted. Her smile cracked into a scream. She collapsed, clutching her chest. We lifted her from the ground. She was breathing, alive, but her eyes stared blank and glassy, as if something had been taken from her and locked inside that altar. The villagers dragged her body away, half praying, half cursing. I remained behind, alone, staring at the glow. My mind begged me to flee, but my heart whispered a darker truth. The altar hadn't burned her flesh. It had devoured something deeper. And when I leaned closer, I swore I smelled it. Not smoke, not ash, but the scent of sins smoldering. Episode 3. The priest who refused to kneel. They brought him in as if he were the cure to our terror. Father Esteban, stern eyes, spine straight as an iron rod, a man who carried scripture like a sword. The bishop sent him after whispers of the altar's light spread too quickly, infecting the village with equal parts awe and dread. He did not come humbly. His black cassock swept the cracked floor like a challenge. Where others trembled, he sneered. "Superstition," he spat, as though the very word could banish what haunted us. We led him to the altar, the heart of our fear. The villagers pressed in behind, rosaries rattling, prayers colliding with curses. The widow who had touched the glow lay half-conscious near the doorway, still muttering incoherent words. Esteban glanced at her with disdain. "She is not possessed," he declared, voice sharp. "She is hysterical. The devil wins when you surrender your reason." But then, the hum began again, low, steady, rising from the stone like breath through hollow lungs. The altar stirred, its light pulsing brighter, hungrier, as if it recognized a new adversary. Esteban did not flinch. He strode to the glowing slab and placed both hands on it. His lips curled into a scoff. "Stone," he said, "cold stone." The crowd gasped. To us, the altar seared deeper than fire, but he stood untouched. His arrogance thickened, and he turned to us with a smile sharp as broken glass. "You see, there is no miracle here, only fear in your minds." But before his laughter could fade, the light changed. It swelled, not warm, not golden, but white so raw it stripped the shadows from the corners of the nave. The sound deepened, rolling like thunder through my bones, and Esteban's smile faltered. His hands trembled though he tried to steady them. His jaw clenched. Then, with a violence no eye could miss, the light pressed him down. Not by flame, not by force, but by weight. Invisible, suffocating weight. His knees buckled, striking the floor with a crack that echoed across the church. The villagers gasped. Some cried out in worship. Others fled in terror. But Esteban fought it. He clawed at the stone floor, tried to rise, but his body shook as if the air itself pinned him. And then the altar spoke. Not with words, but with something heavier. A demand that filled the skull, the lungs, the marrow. The same question it had asked me. "Will you kneel?" Esteban screamed, furious, defiant. "Never!" His shout tore through the nave, but his body betrayed him. He collapsed fully, pressed flat against the cold stone, arms outstretched like a broken crucifix. His voice grew hoarse, fading to a whisper. "It is not of God," he rasped. "It is not of God." When the light finally dimmed, he lay trembling, sweat soaking his cassock. His eyes, once so certain, now held the same hollow fear as ours. And in that silence, we all understood. Even a priest could not stand before the altar. Episode 4. The choir that heard screams. The bishop thought ritual might cleanse the place. "Let voices of praise drown the whispers of fear," he declared. And so the choir was summoned. 40 men, women, and children dressed in white robes, carrying hymnals that smelled of mildew and dust. Their voices, he insisted, would reclaim the church from whatever force had made the altar its throne. That night we gathered again inside La Iglesia del Silencio. The altar glowed faintly, as though it had been waiting. Shadows crawled along the cracked walls like ink searching for paper. I stood at the back, heart hammering, watching as the choir lined before the altar. At first, the music was beautiful. Their voices soared together, trembling yet pure, echoing through the nave like silver bells. The sound wrapped around the stone pillars, lifted toward the dark rafters, filling the silence that had suffocated the church for decades. For a moment, it felt almost holy. And then, it changed. A note faltered, not from a throat but from the air itself. A sound too deep, too raw, split the harmony in half. The choir sang on, oblivious, but I heard it. Screams stitched between the hymns, screams that did not come from the living. The harmony bent, twisted. The voices no longer belonged only to the choir. They were layered with others, ragged, desperate, shrieking. Children crying, women wailing, men groaning like the damned. Every note the choir sang was answered by a chorus of torment. The singers began to notice. Some clutched their throats, swearing they hadn't made the sounds that echoed back at them. Their eyes darted, frightened, but the bishop urged them on, waving his arms, shouting prayers louder than their terror. The altar pulsed brighter, matching the rhythm of the hymns, until it looked alive, beating like a monstrous heart. The glow painted their robes crimson, and with each swell of light, the screams grew sharper, more human, more real. One boy in the choir dropped his hymnal. His voice broke into sobs. "Mother," he cried, "they're calling my name." Another singer, an old man, collapsed, clutching his ears. "It's my wife," he wept. "I hear her in the fire." The rest of the choir began to unravel, their harmony torn apart by panic. What once was song had become chaos, half voices still clinging to praise, half shrieking in agony. And yet the altar drank it all, pulsing brighter, brighter, until the screams nearly drowned the hymns completely. Then, as suddenly as it began, the glow dimmed. The voices, both holy and damned, cut off. Silence snapped back into the church like a noose tightening. The singers stood trembling, their faces pale, their throats raw. Many had bitten their tongues, blood streaked their lips. Their hymnals lay scattered like fallen feathers. The bishop's voice quivered as he tried to speak. "It was only an echo," he whispered. But his eyes betrayed him. He had heard what we all had, and in that suffocating silence, one truth rang louder than any hymn. The altar did not want prayers. It wanted screams. Episode 5. The Candle That Melted Backward. I swore I would not return. After the screams that had bled through the choir's hymns, I told myself I was finished with that church, that altar. But obsession is a cruel chain, and by the following night I was standing there again, clutching a candle as if the weak flame could defend me against something that burned without fire. The bishop had ordered candles placed around the sanctuary, hundreds of them, their small flames flickering in defiance of the altar's unnatural glow. The nave shimmered with light, the shadows dancing like frightened children clinging to the walls. For once, the church looked alive, even warm. But warmth can be a lie. I watched the candle in my hand. Its wax dripped slow and steady, marking time with each falling tear. And then, the impossible happened. The droplet froze halfway down the shaft, quivered, and crawled back up the wick. I blinked hard. Surely fatigue had deceived me. But then it happened again, and again. The wax did not fall. It rose, climbing like pale veins up the candle's body, reforming the taper that had already been lost. Around me, whispers spread as others noticed. Dozens of candles behaved the same way. Wax reversed its course, unmelting, defying gravity and fire alike. The wicks did not shorten but grew taller, reclaiming what had already been burned. One man laughed nervously. "A miracle," he said. "The fire restores instead of consumes." But I knew better. Miracles bring peace, not dread. And what I felt, as the candles grew whole again, was dread so deep it hollowed my lungs. The bishop stepped forward, trembling but proud. "Do you not see?" he cried. "It is a sign. Fire that gives life." Yet even as he spoke, the altar pulsed brighter. The backward melting candles seemed to answer it, their flames bending toward its glow. I swear they leaned like sunflowers toward the sun, bowing, worshipping. Then came the stench. Acrid, heavy, suffocating. The smell not of smoke but of time itself reversing. My stomach churned as I realized the candles weren't being restored. They were being rewound. And with that rewinding came something else. I saw faces in the flames, flickers of mouths opening, eyes wide, twisted in anguish. The wax climbed higher, reshaping into perfect cylinders, but inside the translucent bodies, I glimpsed shadows trapped, clawing upward as though begging for release. A child dropped his candle and screamed. The flame hissed out before it touched the ground. The wax stood unbroken, untouched, as though it had never been lit. Silence followed. Hundreds of unburned candles stood straight, pure and whole, their wicks long and unlit. Every trace of fire was gone, every trace of time erased. Only the altar still glowed. And in that stillness, a realization chilled me to the bone. The altar did not destroy, it consumed in reverse. Not flame that burned forward, but a hunger that reached backward. And the question I could not silence was this: if it could unwind candles, could it also unwind us? Episode 6, The Confession That Ignited It. It was Father Esteban's idea. If the altar burned backward through candles, perhaps it could be forced to reveal its true nature by hearing what only God was meant to hear. Confession. He gathered us in the nave, the air heavy with fear and the faint sweetness of melted wax that had never fallen. The altar glowed dimly, pulsing like a sleeping heart. We sat in silence, waiting for someone to break the stillness. At last, a man stepped forward, a farmer, his face weathered by sun and guilt. He knelt before the glowing stone, trembling. "Forgive me, Father," he whispered, though his eyes never left the altar. "For I beat my son. I beat him until his back bled." The altar flared, not softly, not gently, violently. Light erupted from its surface, white and searing, flooding the church. The farmer's words seemed to fuel it. Each syllable was tender. The crowd gasped, but the man continued, tears streaming. "I wished him dead. I cursed my own blood." The glow surged higher. The hum deepened. I could feel it in my chest, a resonance that made my ribs ache. The farmer collapsed to the ground, sobbing. The altar dimmed only when his confession choked into silence. Then another voice rose, a woman, pale, frail, her veil trembling. "I poisoned my neighbor's well," she confessed. "I watched their children sicken." The altar blazed again. This time the light climbed the walls, painting saints in the stained glass with a halo of fireless flame. The woman screamed as the glow bathed her face, not from pain, but from something deeper, as if the altar had reached into her chest and pulled the words straight from her soul. One by one they came, adulterers, thieves, liars, killers in secret. Each confession ignited the altar higher, brighter, until it seemed the church itself might collapse beneath the weight of it. But it was not forgiveness we felt, it was hunger. With every sin spoken aloud, the altar drank. Its light sharpened, feeding not on grace, but on guilt. The hum became a chant, thousands of voices layered together, as though every sin ever uttered was repeating itself within those walls. Then it was my turn. I hadn't meant to speak, but my mouth betrayed me. The words tore from my throat unbidden. "I went to the altar alone," I whispered, trembling. "I touched it. I should have run, but I didn't. I wanted to see." The altar roared. It blazed so violently I thought my skin would split open. My secret, my curiosity, my obsession was fuel more potent than firewood. The church was ablaze in light, though no flame touched stone or wood. People screamed, some fled, some knelt, some clawed at their throats as if choking on their own truths. And in that frenzy I understood. The altar did not forgive sins. It devoured them. And the more we confessed, the brighter it burned. Episode 7, The Child Who Saw Angels Burning. The confessions had left the village hollow. Men and women walked with bowed heads, their sins stripped bare, their voices stolen by the altar's glow. Yet the church still pulsed, waiting for something more. It was the child who broke the silence. Her name was Lucia, no more than 7. She wandered into the nave one afternoon, barefoot, her dress frayed and stained by the earth she played in. No one had brought her, no one dared stop her. Children, we thought, were too innocent to be touched by that cursed light. She stood before the altar, tilting her head like a sparrow studying the sun. Her eyes, wide, unblinking, reflected the glow. And then, in a voice too steady for a child, she spoke. "They're burning," she said. The villagers stirred uneasily. "Who, child?" Father Esteban asked, his voice weak. "The angels," Lucia whispered. "They kneel all around it. Their wings are on fire." A hush fell. I strained my ears, desperate to believe she was imagining things. But the altar's light seemed to flicker in answer, as though it heard her. Lucia stepped closer. "They're screaming, but not with their mouths. They're screaming inside my head." The bishop tried to drag her back, but she shrugged off his hands with unnatural strength. Her small frame trembled, her eyes locked on the impossible sight only she could see. "They're burning," she repeated. "Their feathers fall like ash, but the ash goes up instead of down." The villagers gasped as one. Even those who had sworn the altar was a miracle began to cross themselves violently. I could not move. I could only watch as Lucia reached a hand toward the glow. For a moment I thought it would devour her, as it had the widow, as it had nearly devoured me. But the light gentled, softening into a halo that wrapped around her tiny fingers. Lucia smiled faintly. "They're asking me to help them," she whispered. "But I can't. The fire isn't real. It's forever." Her body stiffened. She gasped, eyes rolling back, and then collapsed on the stone floor. We rushed to her side. Her skin was cold, her pulse faint, but her lips still moved. I bent close to hear her. "They said, the altar is not God's." Her voice cracked like dry wood. "It's older than God." Then she went still. Her chest rose and fell, shallow but steady, as though she had simply fallen into a sleep too heavy for a child. The bishop declared it madness, a vision sent by the devil to mislead us. But I saw the fear in his eyes, the same terror strangling my own heart, because Lucia had seen what none of us dared imagine. The altar did not only consume sins, it consumed the holy. And if angels could burn there, what chance did we have? Episode 8, The Midnight Sermon. It began with the bells. No one had touched them in decades, yet at midnight they tolled, low, mournful and hollow, dragging the entire village from restless dreams. One by one, doors creaked open, lanterns swayed in trembling hands. We followed the sound like cattle drawn to a slaughterhouse, unable to resist. The bells led us back to La Iglesia del Silencio. Its doors, locked tight the day before, now yawned wide. Inside, the altar glowed as though it had been waiting for us all along. No priest stood at the pulpit, no choir filled the loft. Yet when we stepped across the threshold, a voice rose, clear, commanding, not from any throat, but from the walls themselves. It was a sermon. "My children," it intoned, though no mouth moved, "you have come to me in fear, in shame, in hunger. But I know you. I have always known you." We froze, staring at one another, but no one dared speak. The glow from the altar pulsed with each syllable, brighter, deeper, as though the words themselves were fuel. The voice was not Esteban's, nor the bishop's. It was something older, layered with countless tones, man and woman, child and elder, saint and sinner, all speaking as one. "You kneel before what you do not understand," it said. "You sing hymns you do not believe. You confess sins you still crave. But I accept them all. Every prayer, every lie, every wound." The villagers began to weep. Some sank to their knees, unable to bear the weight of it. Others pressed their hands to their ears, desperate to silence what could not be silenced. Father Esteban stood tall at the front, fists clenched. "Blasphemy!" he shouted. "This is no voice of God." The altar flared. The voice laughed, not cruel but vast, a sound that shook dust from the rafters. "Even you, shepherd, feed me," it said. "Every doubt, every pride, every hidden thought. Do you not feel lighter already?" Esteban fell silent, his lips trembling. The sermon went on, weaving through scripture and heresy with ease, twisting holy words into promises that felt more seductive than any hymn. It told us our suffering was not punishment but offering. Our fears, our sins, our very breath, all fuel to keep its light alive. And the terrible truth? We believed. Not because the words were holy, but because they were undeniable. Each syllable pierced deeper than any priest's sermon, reaching into marrow, into memory. It was not teaching us, it was owning us. When it ended, the glow dimmed to a soft pulse. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating. None of us spoke as we stumbled out into the night. But as I looked back, I swore the altar still throbbed faintly, as though listening, waiting for us to return. And in the hollow of my chest, the words echoed like chains. Every fear, every sin, every breath. I understood then what the altar wanted. It wanted a congregation. Episode 9, The Relic That Bled Smoke. The bishop returned with a weapon. Not a sword, not a prayer, but a relic, an ornate golden reliquary said to hold the finger bone of Saint Aurelius, martyr of the early church. He carried it as though it were a torch of heaven itself, its jeweled case gleaming even in the gloom. "If this altar is not of God," he declared to the trembling villagers, "then let what is holy unmask it." We followed him inside, though every step felt like walking into a tomb. The altar pulsed faintly, waiting, its glow like a sleeping beast's breath. The bishop raised the reliquary high, his voice shaking with both fear and pride. "By the blood of the saints, by the faith of the holy, I cast you out." He placed the reliquary upon the altar. At first nothing happened. The light dimmed, almost as if it recoiled. A ripple of hope swept through us. Perhaps the relic was stronger. Perhaps heaven still held dominion here. But then, the reliquary began to sweat. Not water, not oil, but blood, thick and dark, seeping through the cracks of gold and dripping onto the glowing stone. The bishop gasped, clutching his chest as the crowd shrieked. The altar flared, not in surrender, but in triumph. The relic hissed, its metal blackening, its jewels cracking like brittle bones. And from the seams where blood should have flowed, a new horror emerged. Smoke, black smoke, curling upward in lazy tendrils, twisting into shapes that did not belong in this world. Faces, hollow-eyed, screaming, shifting faster than breath. The villagers stumbled back, some choking, others clawing at the air as though the smoke reached for them. I watched, frozen, as the relic bled its essence away, feeding the altar's hunger. Then the smoke changed. It did not rise to the ceiling as smoke should. It sank. It coiled down to the pews, to the floor, wrapping around our ankles like chains. The church filled with the stench of burning flesh that wasn't burning. Lucia, the child who had seen angels aflame, collapsed in her mother's arms. Her eyes snapped open, white and unseeing, and she spoke in a voice not her own. "They are trapped in it. Every saint, every prayer, every offering. All burn, all ash, but no ash remains." The bishop screamed and tried to snatch back the reliquary, but the moment his fingers touched it, the gold crumbled into dust. The altar absorbed it all, the bone, the jewels, the faith it represented, until nothing remained. Silence fell. The smoke withdrew, curling back into the glow as though satisfied. The villagers looked on with hollow eyes, their hope extinguished. And then the altar pulsed once more, brighter than before, its hum deeper, hungrier. The relic had not unmasked it. The relic had fed it. And as I stared at the smoldering stone, I knew the truth we had all been avoiding. The altar was not content with our sins alone. It devoured our faith too.
Epilogue: The light that never ended. I left the church at dawn. The air outside was cold, sharp with the scent of dew, but it felt no cleaner than the stench I carried from within. Behind me, the doors groaned shut, though no hand touched them. The glow still pulsed faintly through the cracks, like a heart that would never stop beating. The village was silent. Those who had knelt during the black sermon shuffled back to their homes like shadows, their eyes hollow, their lips trembling with words they dared not speak. Some clutched rosaries, though the beads no longer comforted them. Others stared into nothing, as if waiting for the altar's voice to return. I told myself I was free, that I had walked away when the others bowed, that my body, though broken, had not surrendered. But when I reached the well in the village square, I caught my reflection in the water, and there it was, the light, faint, but unmistakable, flickering inside my eyes like embers refusing to die. I stumbled back, shaking my head, whispering prayers that tasted like ash on my tongue. But no matter how I blinked, no matter how I looked away, the glow remained. I thought of Lucia, the child who had seen angels burning. I thought of Sister Magdalena, her smile no longer her own. I thought of Father Esteban, his faith shattered, his forehead pressed into stone. And I realized what had happened. The altar had not asked me to kneel. It had made me its messenger. At night, I hear it. Not in the distance, not in the church, but within me, a hum beneath my ribs, a pulse in my skull, words too old to name, too heavy to silence. Every fear, every sin, every breath, Sometimes I wake with ash on my pillow. Sometimes with soot on my hands. And sometimes, worst of all, I wake smiling, whispering the words of the Black Sermon as if they were my own. The villagers avoid me now. They cross themselves when I pass, mutter prayers under their breath. But I see the truth in their eyes. They already belong to it. We all do. Because the altar was never just stone. It was never confined to that church. It is hunger. It is surrender. And hunger does not stay locked away. I tell myself I will run. I will leave this village, this land, this cursed place. But deep down, I know the truth. I could travel to the ends of the earth. And still, when I looked into a pool of water, or a shard of glass, or the eyes of a stranger, I would see the same glow. The altar no longer waits for us to come to it. It is already here. It is already everywhere. And it will never stop burning.